So tier list. A lot of new things have happened in the game. We've got some new weapons and some balance changes. Nothing super major, but I think it's enough that the competitive scene has had time to kind of rebalance and figure out some new things. There's not that much that's going to actually be that different. So let me... Did I have my... Do I still have my old tier list posted? So this is what the tier list looked like way back then. And I'm taking a look at it. Still looking relatively similar. There are definitely going to be some significant changes, though. And there's a cat now. So this is what it was. But now we've got some new weapons, and we've got some changes, so here we go. Double gem, gemception. Which one's real? None of them are real. They're all just pixels on your screen. Nobody's seeing the real gem right now. Hi there, cat. Yeah, he's being very cuddly at the moment, and I approve. Okay. So... there is a tier that's just that. And it is these two weapons. These two weapons are all you need in a team comp. There are literally teams that are being played that are consisting entirely of Splash-o-matic and Machine. I've seen 3 Splash-o-matics, 1 Machine. I've seen 2 of each. I have seen 3 Machines, 1 Splash-o-matic, all being played in top-level JP tournaments. These two weapons are absolutely just nuts, and they complement each other extremely well, and counter each other extremely well, as it turns out. The Splash-o-matic is the best painter for Crab Tank in the game, and Crab Tank is by far the best special in the game. It's not even close. The Crab Tank right now is the metagame. You play around Crab Tank. Everything that you are trying to run on a team comp, you have to ask yourself, what does this do against Crab Tank? And that is kind of the question that we will be asking ourselves as we go down the list is, what can this thing do if there's a Crab Tank on the map? So right now, one of the best answers to that question, what do you do if there's a Crab Tank on the map, is throw a Booyah Bomb at it. And the prime Booyah Bomb weapon of the moment is the Sloshing Machine, and has been for the entire duration of the game. And another answer to what do you do about a Crab Tank is damage it from behind. Well, you can slosh with the Sloshing Machine up over the top of the Crab Tank, and so that is another possible solution to dealing with a Crab Tank user. So then another thing that is very, very powerful in this game is throwing a bunch of just like what Ren called trash damage, which is we're just chucking something into the choke point. We're not even really caring that much about whether it hits something. We just want to like zone them out of this spot, and so we're going to lazily throw a fizzy bomb into that area. And well, Sloshing Machine, that is what it has been doing for the entire duration of competitive Splatoon 3. It has been chucking a bunch of fizzy bombs into choke points until it gets Booyah Bomb, then launching the Booyah Bomb at the most important target and going back to chucking fizzy bombs and taking fights when it has to. And it's only when it starts having to take fights that you know whether or not the player is actually experienced on the Sloshing Machine, because all of the rest of that is really easy. And that is something to consider. Like, the weapon being easy is an advantage in its favor. You don't have to, master the blade to be able to play a machine. Like, everyone has a pocket machine. Everyone has a pocket splash. You have to get a little used to Crab Tank, and maybe if you don't play shooters, then learning the movement mechanics that shooters can abuse, especially lightweight ones like the splash, is something that's going to take some time. But these are two really straightforward weapons that do not require that much extra thought. They are weapons that you can plug into literally any spot on a team comp. The Splash-o-matic is a Slayer support and a skirmisher, and it can throw burst bombs, so it can kind of pseudo-anchor a little bit if it needs to. And it becomes an anchor when it pulls Crab Tank out, and suddenly it's a Hydra that never has to charge. Then the machine can play support, it can play skirmisher, it can play Slayer, it can throw fizzy bombs from a distance, it can throw booyah bomb from a distance. Like, these weapons are some of the most versatile in the game. And when I say versatile, I don't mean... I don't mean jack of all trades, master of none. I mean jack of all trades, master of everything. So if there is a slot on your team that you're trying to figure out what to put in it, and you've got like a flex player who can play a number of different things, you're telling that flex player to play one of these two weapons, is basically what's happening most of the time. There's really not that much else that plays so many roles so well and that gets the team so much. And I cannot stress enough just how much of a crab rave the metagame is right now. So, yeah, these are the weapons that define the meta. So, like, in the past, I've always called this tier meta-defining. These are the weapons that the meta arises in response to. So I'll just put those there because that takes up less space on the screen, and I want to save vertical space for the sake of making the other ones fit. So yeah, yeah, whatever. Anyway, yeah, Crab is cool. Like, don't get me wrong here. I think Crab is actually really well designed. It's just a little overtuned. Crab is very good, but if you nerf certain like numbers that it has, it will come down to being reasonable. If you nerf its duration, if you nerf its range, damage, its armor, there are a number of different things that you can do to it that will change it and make it less overwhelming. Any of those things could work really well, but something's got to come down on the Crab Tank, and it really should have come down at the beginning of this season. I have no earthly idea why this was not the very first thing that the dev team looked at to nerf, because it was already dominant at the time, and then all they did was nerf missiles, which was in part a counter to Crab Tank, but also was another dominant special that everyone had to consider, and now they're less considering missiles, more considering Crab Tank. So, anyway, so now the next tier down is going to be the best answers to it. Like I said, this right here is already a team comp. All you need are these two weapons, but the weapons that are going to deal with these the best are what we're looking at next. And so I'm going to get a few different ideas out here, and then I'll start talking about them one by one. So just give me a minute to put some stuff up here. All right, I think that's it. So let's go through all of these. So Flingza is a very, very frequent weapon that's almost up in meta-defining tier. If this were the patch right before the new season, it would be in meta-defining tier. Like, there was a time where the optimal team comp was some combination of 3 of these 2 weapons plus a Flingza Roller. And that was what all the backline weapons were running. And this is still largely what backline weapons are running. So people who are like the hard charger mains right now, their top level is starting to feel forced out. So me putting the E-liter here is a little bit... You know what? I think I actually dropped the E-liter 1. We'll talk about why in a minute, but I've already had a discussion with Ren about that. But the top charger players are generally playing Flingza right now, because Flingza gives them a little bit more mobility. It gives them missiles. Flingza got nerfed, which is why I'm like half considering putting this back up here, because at this point, these are the weapons that we're seeing the most out of anything right now. Like, let me just really quick pull up Gambawumi is a player who's very in touch with the Japanese scene and will post the weapons that top Japanese teams are playing in tournaments. So these are the rosters so this is the rosters, and I think these are the placements. Because I think like this team is this team, and then this team is this team. You know, they line up. So you can probably look at this because this will actually show the placement. So this is the first place team on the left, and you move across. So they post the weapon comps that are being played by the top Japanese teams right now. You can see there's a lot of Splash-o-matic. There's a lot of Sloshing Machine. So you can kind of just look down the list and see what people are generally playing right now. And you can see there is a good amount of variety. And it depends kind of on the mode as well. So this is some data. Gross. Do not like gross. So you can see that like this is a data set that I am considering when going into this and looking at this. And I'm looking through it, like we're seeing a charger or two here and there. We're actually seeing a lot of heavy, and we're also seeing a lot of Flingza still. So, like, I'm not a backliner, and going back to this, I'm looking at this and I'm not sure, because the big thing about Flingza that is different from the last tier list is that the missiles got nerfed. For those who don't know, the way that missiles work now is that they cannot be charged while they are launched. There is a very long delay between when you launch them and when they charge up again. So before, every backliner was just running a Flingza because it gave them the mobility that they needed to move around. They still had the missiles to contest any backliner, and they could paint a lot with it. Now that is nerfed, I'm going to put the E-Leader up here on the low end of this tier, because I'm on the fence about where I think it belongs. But it might well be that Flingza is in a similar place to it at this point. But there's definitely an order to these here. So anyway, Flingza is the weapon that like the top level backline players are tending towards at the moment. At least last I have looked into it. We're also actually seeing a lot of heavy, which I still feel like it's here, but I see a lot more people pushing it and using it. So backline is a little bit of a blind spot for me, and we might have to reconsider that a little bit as time goes on and I get more weapons up on the list. But let's get through the rest of these for now. Flings has been like that backline alternative for a long time now. And so people are still good at it, and missiles are still good. They're just worse. And that's why I dropped it a tier. So still very viable. Still definitely the best roller in the game. Then we've got 52, which has always been a valid replacement for if you want something more aggressive in terms of the main weapon than the standard paint till crab or throw fizzy bombs sort of play style. Same kind of deal with the Splattershot. The issue with these two is they're a little bit less survivable, so they're a little bit higher risk, higher reward. If you could, like, these are the two weapons that's like, if you want to stop these guys before they get special, you want to send one of these two weapons in to try and get that pick. But doing so is a little bit riskier, and usually, you know, if something is risky, you're not gonna grab one of those two. So, then Dualie Squelchers is kind of one of the best midline weapons right now. I don't know. That's a strong claim because obviously Sloshing Machine exists. But in terms of like a standard kind of crossfire skirmisher midline, this is definitely one of those that can make it work. Pair this with a really aggressive frontliner, and that's an amazing fighting pair that can go up and make things happen. But there are, I think, a lot of issues right now in the meta for something like a Dualie Squelchers. There aren't as many flank routes. There aren't as many awkward angles that it can take on people. So a lot of the time you're just fighting it head on. So you're either going to just fight it with a crab or like use maybe a backliner to deal with it, or you're going to, you know, rush someone forward at it and try to get on top of it and force it back. So it still has the role that it always did, and its special is very good. It's just not quite like the absolute top tier. I still think it's really strong, and I still think anyone could run it if they wanted to. So now we get down into the more dubious range of this list. Like, I'm very confident that these weapons should be where they are. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I would put up there, and I might start adjusting it as time goes on. The Tetras probably still belong up here. We'll get to it eventually. But C Jr, I think, is very viable. I think it is one of the best like support weapons that there is in the game, because torpedo pressure is just so annoying. Like, what does a crab actually do if a torpedo gets thrown up and behind it, right? It just kind of like has to ball up and tank the damage or something. It can't shoot at that very easily. It doesn't have the speed to be able to aim at that and knock it out of the air, nor does it want to have to do that. So somebody else kind of has to deal with that for it. Torpedoes are also just a really good anti-backline tool. And it's part of the reason why like these weapons are struggling a little bit more than they used to, because there are more weapons that have torpedoes on them now. And so you throw one of those at one of these guys, and they've got to waste one of their precious shots on taking out the torpedo before they go back to do anything. Same deal with like the Hydra, with anything else that you're trying to work with here. So it's a very annoying force in the meta right now, and it just gets wave breakers like nobody's business. Wave breaker is, like I've said, a very good special, and it makes it very difficult for the team to function while one's active. So I feel comfortable putting it up there as like even one of the best weapons. I think that that's one of the best junior kits we've ever had. So Explo is still Explo. It's not super changed. It's nice to have the ability to see things and be able to hit them up over walls after you can see them, because you have the point sensor plus the arcing shots. This, you know, up and over the top of stuff splash damage is always going to be useful because it outranges, or not outranges, it can fight weapons that outrange it very effectively. So E-Liter can't keep it down because it can just sit behind a wall and keep chucking the shots over the top. And it can threaten crabs. So it has some tools there. And then E-Liter, like I said, is one of the most dubious here. I'm just not sure where exactly we want to put this right now. Like I said, backliners are tending to stray away from this, but with Flingza being a little bit more nerfed, maybe it's going to make a little bit of a resurgence. Like, we're looking back here, and we're still seeing some E-Liters peppered in there. I feel comfortable leaving it where it's at because I think we're seeing enough of it at top level that we can say, yeah, this is going to be fine. Like, if you're a Charger player, I wouldn't completely give up on it. I don't think it's the worst. It may not be as overwhelmingly powerful as it was at the beginning of the game, especially now with a map like Flounder Heights where it's really hard to find a good backline position for something that long-ranged. But I think it's playable. I think you can run that in a top-level comp, and you're not holding your team back so much that... Because, like, realistically speaking, if someone plays E-Liter and you tell them, play something else instead, are they going to play that something else better than they're going to play the E-Liter? They're probably a Charger main. They're probably someone who's pretty good at the Charger and not as good at other stuff. So on like the vast majority of teams, if they've got someone who is playing E-Liter, I'm like, you could switch them onto a Splash or a Machine. I don't know how much more effective they're going to be on that weapon than they are on the weapon that they've mained and practiced that much. So I don't know. That one's on the fence. That one I'll leave to the backliners to debate about. What about scope? I generally just rank them the same. There is certainly a little bit of a difference. Scope versus unscoped, there are advantages and disadvantages. A lot of the time it's personal preference. But I don't think that the scope makes so much of a difference that it would change the tier placement. If it does, it's very, very slight. So I just tend to not rate the scoped versus unscoped variants differently. Okay, so now we're going to get into a very large tier of playable, but maybe somewhat outclassed. And there's a lot that's in here, which I think is very good for the game. It's cool that there is so much stuff that is playable, even in really, really high-level play right now. So I'm going to dump a whole bunch of stuff up here, and then we'll talk about it. Okay. I think what I'll do... I think I'll do it like this. Instead of some modes, I'll say situations. So that'll cover that. There is a lot, for sure, that go into these two tiers. Is there anything here that I'm missing? I've placed the Splat... Oh, no, I haven't placed the Splat Charger yet. Whoops. Where'd that go? There it is. Oh, I'm missing Range Blaster. Whoops. Yeah, that belongs up there. I'm on the fence about... I might need, like, even a separate tier for Bamboo and Blob. I feel like the company that these two weapons are in is definitely, like, far below. But I also don't feel comfortable putting it all the way up with weapons like the Ballpoint, the Carbon Deco, the Squeezer, like weapons that people are playing competitively. The Range Blaster. Range Blaster should probably be a little bit on the high side here. I don't feel I can put it with those, but like all of these other ones, I'm like, oh, that looks way grosser. So we'll deal with that when we get to it. So let's go over like half of the cast that I just put into place. Let me order this a little bit too. Ordering it is going to be hard. Okay, I'm going to talk now. So, Range Blaster has never really like left the game. If you can hit direct to the Range Blaster, you're going to be able to do really well. It's just a lot of firepower and really good AoE damage from a pretty good distance away, and it's difficult to fight against. It's something that will force the enemy team to back up immediately if it gets into a good position. Positioning it is difficult, and it's the biggest reason that it's down as low as it is simply that it does not paint really well at all. It needs somebody else on its team to paint for it. And so something that, you know, you have to consider on a high-level team is, all right, if we're going to try and make this comp work around this weapon, then that means that one player choosing this weapon means that the other three of us have to pick weapons in a certain way to enable that. And the question of whether you're willing to do that is kind of complicated and political sometimes within the team. So if you got someone who can play it and they're getting value on it, you know, I'm always happy to run it because I play weapons that paint well. And so I don't care that much because I'm going to be able to support it one way or the other. But sometimes you can make it so that like your backline player is in a little bit of a pinch because they, you know, might be a Hydra main. And if somebody on your team wants to pick Blaster, they're like, well, one of us can't do that because then we don't have enough paint on the team comp. So it's that sort of a challenge for it. It gets a bomb, which is great. It has Wave Breaker, which is, you know, like we've said, totally fine. Not one of those game-changing specials like a Crab Tank or a Booyah Bomb, but it's one of the next best kinds of things. It's up there with like the Trizuka. I'd say Killer Whale is probably in the same category because of its ability to counter Crab Tank. So like there are a few specials that are like very good acceptable specials that you never really hate to have, and that's one of them. Oh, I never talked about the Tetra Dualies. I just realized that. My opinions on Tetra Dualies haven't really changed that much. They are hold forward, get splats, be very, very, very aggressive, get splatted a lot yourself, but push them back so far that you're able to make up for it in the time that it takes for you to respawn and get back, and keep pushing the tempo forward. And that's really good against stuff like sloshing machines, because sloshing machines do not have the kill time or the mobility, and so if you get on top of them, you can just dive them and beat them. They don't fare so well against an active crab tank, and so I don't know. The Splash-o-matic matchup is a little bit more touch and go, but they do outrange the Splash pretty well. So if you're trying to initiate fights before they're able to get specials, that's a pretty good option for it. Anyway, moving on. Why Tetra over Wiper? We'll get to Wiper, but I personally believe that Wiper is a bit overhyped right now, but again, we'll talk about it. It is definitely higher up than it used to be, but I'm on Range Blaster right now. So, Range Blaster. Really solid, good AoE damage, can threaten things from over the top of stuff, and it has an answer to Crab Tank. It has its AoE. It can shoot over the top of the Crab Tanks for armor and hit the player that's behind it. So there's a whole bunch of different tools there that are all really important for combating the current meta. It's just paint hungry, and that's its biggest weakness. The Splatlings, the state of backline is just something that I'm not as in touch with, because I don't play those weapons, and so I can only talk about what I see. I'm seeing a lot of top backline players saying that they really like Heavy right now, the Wavebreaker in particular being really useful, and its ability to walk forward and be mobile being really useful. I can't say too much more about it and why it in particular over, say, the Ballpoint, except, Wavebreaker, good special. The advantage over Heavy is that over Hydra, is that it's more mobile, that it's able to move into the positions it needs to be in a little bit more aggressively, and also it's able to get out of certain situations a little bit more effectively, and the charge time isn't quite as rough. So I'm guessing that is a big factor in it, but I can only say so much about it, like I said, and that's why I've lumped them all into about the same place here. Ballpoint, I think in terms of main weapon, this is the best Splatling, and it's really its kit that's holding it back. That's my personal opinion, and that might not be reflective of what other backliners will tell you. Again, this entire section of 4 weapons I would completely defer to Devi's opinion on. But Ballpoint, it gives you really, really good close range efficacy. The DPS from the short range shots is just insane. And it gives you really good range. And the nice thing about Ballpoint is that you can maintain it. That unlike the Heavy or the Hydra, when you have charge, you're going to have charge almost the entire way until you run out of ink. Because you can just keep quarter charging and then firing, and then quarter charging and then firing. And like, you're much more sustained damage. You're a much more sustained threat on the map when you have a Ballpoint than you are with the other 2 weapons. The other weapons are cycle-based. The other weapons are like, okay, they're firing. They're not firing anymore. Go. Okay, they're firing again, stop. But the Ballpoint is like, they're just still going, man. They're still firing. They haven't stopped. I can't move. I can't, guys. Help. It takes a little bit more to move through like an active zone that a Ballpoint is trying to control. So that's a really nice thing about it. And it's also a more mobile Splatling than the Hydra is. So that's super nice. It's just, it's not getting a lot out of its fizzy bombs, because in order to play that playstyle of having a lot of sustained fire, you just don't put out subs a lot. Beacons was actually the perfect sub for it to have, because beacons let it put the sub down and then forget about the sub being there and not have to follow up on it, not have to do anything with it. It was just there and useful, and the ballpoint could go someplace else. So yeah, I don't think it gets that much out of Fizzy Bomb. It's a big chug on the ink tank to use the Fizzy Bomb. And then Inkjet can be helpful sometimes. Like, there are always going to be niche uses for any of these specials, because Inkjet's not a terrible special. It's weaker than it used to be, but it's not terrible. But it's best used on a frontline weapon that's going to be pushing up underneath ledges, which is exactly the opposite of the positioning that the ballpoint wants to be at. So you end up with a lot of these, like, early T-Tech players in Splatoon 2's lifespan often had this problem where they would trigger the Inkjet from too far away. And so the opponents would literally just have time to move out of the way of the shots. Like, they'd have time to dodge them and then get behind cover so that none of the rest of them were hitting. Whereas what you want to be doing with Inkjet is getting right up on top of someone so that the very first shot is a direct and you get rid of them before they can react. And getting into the position where you can make that kind of play is just really difficult with a backline weapon. So, big mismatch with the kit, and the fact that it's up here as far as it is with such a big kit mismatch, I think is a huge... it says a lot of the main weapon itself. So... okay, T-Tech main. I'm not a T-Tech main. T-Tech has Tri-Strike in this game. Okay, and then Tri-Stringer. Tri-Stringer, I think... I've heard so many weird varying opinions on this. Because, like, some people were saying, oh yeah, Tri-Stringer's a low tier. I'm like, no, it's not. It's really not. And then somebody got a result with it in Japan, and everyone's like, wait, Tri-Stringer's good, guys. Tri-Stringer's good. We should all play Tri-Stringer. It's like, it's niche. It's good in specific situations or on specific teams. I don't want to say that it's like a specific mode or something like that makes it. I don't want to drop it down here to this area, because these weapons are still good. Don't get me wrong. It's just there are certain situations you would use them, and otherwise you'd use something else. Here, it's more of like a general purpose sort of thing, and I think it's not an A tier. It's like a B tier. It's fine. You can use it. Like, you can see it used in a very, very high level of play. It'll work. It's good for chip damage comps. You know, you throw a bunch... It plays really, really well off of burst bombs from the splash. Like, it's not bad. But I also don't think it's, like, the best thing since sliced bread. Like, it has pretty slow DPS. They did improve the painting significantly, which is part of the reason why it's up here more. But it's still relatively slow to get picks and needs to be kept very safe in order to do things. And so its challenge is having enough of an impact on the game with the few shots that it has that it's worth fielding one over something else. Because you're not going to get very fast splats with this thing. You're going to do like sustained damage and sustained zone control that's going to be pretty universally non-lethal unless it's paired with something else, or unless the opponent doesn't get out of the way very quickly. So it doesn't enforce its zone very well. So it needs to be a factor in like every single fight on the map in order to be useful, and it can get stretched kind of thin sometimes. So you got to be very efficient to play that weapon, but it does work. And then Hydra, you know, my opinion on Hydra hasn't really changed ever. It is very high risk, very high reward, very big downsides, but it can also just wipe the enemy team off a single charge by itself if it's played well. It needs to get into the right kinds of positions, and so your positioning is going to be absolutely crucial when using this weapon. And you also need to make good use of the auto bombs to be able to scout and see if you're being flanked, especially on some of the more difficult maps for it, like maybe Flounder, where you can get flanked on every side, and you just kind of need to always know where stuff is going on in the game. So I still see that, you know, at my level of play, we're not seeing quite as much of it at top level anymore. There's like one comp that was running it here. And I'm obviously this is not a hugely representative sample of what's being played, but if you see a weapon being played and getting, you know, top 8 in one of these tournaments, that does say something in its defense, I would say. And I have more of that kind of data than I have on NA tournaments, because NA tournaments are usually just playing one of these two weapons, and there's not nearly as much variety in the weapon pool that people are playing. So, backline, like I said, I don't know. Carbon Deco. Carbon Deco is, in my opinion, and has always been, the best sharking roller. Having Carbon plus a Burst Bomb, I think, has just always been such a powerful combo. And the fact that they got it back and actually gave it a good special this time means that it is... It's hard to say that it's the best the weapon's ever been, because here's the thing. The reason that you ran Carbon Deco in Splatoon 2 was that it was the fastest kill time in the entire game through armor. Nothing else splatted someone who had armor faster than a Carbon did. And because of that, you know, with armor being as much a part of the meta in Splatoon 2 as it was for such a long time, running one of these was never that big of a problem, and you just had to bring a little bit of paint for it. It's got kind of the same thing that the Blaster has, where you need to paint a lot to set this thing up. But there are a lot of weapons that you're able to pair with it to make that happen, and just like the Blaster, I don't think that's enough to just stop you from wanting to consider it in the first place. It is seeing a good amount of use. Anybody who plays that sharking roller play style, this is your best pick, I think. It's just really difficult to deal with, especially with latency and everything, if it gets behind your team. It splats very quickly, very consistently. You just need to get good at aiming burst bombs and aiming roller flicks, and you can become an absolute wrecking ball of a player. So, strong weapon, not the strongest. I still think that the sharking roller play style is flawed. And that's, you know, that's why it's down here, despite being the best of its kind. But for what it is, like, this is the best you're probably going to find. The Trizooka is a huge addition to it. Like, that is so good for that weapon, because now it has even more of a ranged option than even the Burst Bomb was. The Burst Bomb was already plenty, because you can poke at people from a distance, like you can with like a Splash-o-matic, which is still relatively short range itself. But now you've got a Trizooka. You can just like take someone out at like Charger range, if they're in your way and they're making it difficult to pass an area. Or like if you're sharked in a position and you want to do more damage than just throw a burst bomb to poke at someone, you can just delete them instead with your Trizooka. So I think that gives it a lot of options. Trizooka isn't the best for it in every situation. Like, it is not a panic special for it at all. Once you're at short range, you always just want to be using the main weapon, even if you have the special ready. So it's in a bit of an awkward spot, like the V-Shot, where you want to be popping the special from further back, but then moving forward, and I think that's even more awkward for it to navigate, because at least the Splattershot can paint for itself pretty well. This is not going to do that quite as quickly or as efficiently. And it's even more important for this to maintain stealth, because the Splattershot can kind of paint its feet and get itself out of tricky situations, because it's a shooter. It can paint for itself very, very fast, and I think that mobility outweighs the fact that the Carbon is a lightweight weapon. I think being able to put paint down for yourself is more important than weapon weight at a certain point, which is why, for example, I don't even think of the Luna Blaster as a lightweight weapon, because technically it is, but the amount of paint that you're able to put down on the ground for yourself is so little that you have a hard time getting in a lot of the time. So Carbon Deco, pretty darn solid. If you play that sharking roller, this is probably what you want to be switching to off of the Splat roller, which I think was the best option previously. Another thing that we'll talk about a little bit when we get to the Mini and the Junior is that I think that Big Bubbler is starting to fall out of style. So that's another reason that the Splat roller is a little bit less preferred at the moment. So, okay, Stamper. Stamper has been getting pushed in NA by Chara for a very long time. I think that will give it a little bit of a bias in that there's this very visible, consistently streaming and consistently posting content top player who is talking about what he likes about this weapon. Fusion is also a very high-level representative of this weapon. Like, people have been giving it an honest try, and so, I'm not going to rate it any higher than it is currently, because I think that it is being helped by having friends in high places. By the fact that Chara thinks that the weapon is cool and is trying to make it work. But, like, I think it definitely has weaknesses. I think that it runs into these kinds of weapons up here, and it's probably going to lose that 1v1 because it just doesn't have quite the same DPS. But the advantages of it are a lot of chip damage, the ability to hit from really far away, the one-shot potential at close range, and very, very high damage against Crab Tank. The Splatanas have been gifted with this insane amount of shots, insanely low amount of shots that they need to actually peel off Crab Tank armor, and they can apply those shots from relatively far away. So if you get it an off angle to a Crab Tank with a Splatana, and you're able to keep just doing like light attacks, you'll shred it remarkably quickly, and often you'll be able to get in a good amount of damage before you have to duck away, before it's able to move its slow, rapid-fire aim to you. And so that is a way that people are starting to try and counter Crab Tanks now. So because it has that extra utility, and because it has the versatility of the chip damage and the ability to one-shot, all of these things add up to make it pretty useful if you play around its strengths and avoid its weaknesses, namely running into someone who's just like running at you with a frontline weapon. It does need to be set up a bit. You really like running one of these with something else that has chip damage, which fortunately you have in the Splash-o-matic. So you'll see a lot of people trying to work these into comps specifically with Splash-o-matics. It's also not a bad pairing with Explo, although that does lead to a slightly slower moving team comp. I'm debating whether I actually want Explo down a level, because I haven't been seeing that as much in top level. But again, backline... Would I put it below the E-leader? I don't know. I feel like those are the two things that you're probably considering at absolute top level if you're definitely going to run a hard anchor. I'll leave it there for now. Again, like, the whole backline section here is pretty dubious to me. This is the part where, like, I think if anyone disagrees with anything in the tier list, it's either going to be one of those or one of the, like, lower tiers that I don't care that much about. Where it's like, okay, I know that this weapon has significant weaknesses. Which level of low tier I put it in, whatever. But I think that's the part which I think is most questionable about this tier list. But we'll move on from there. Stamper, I think I've talked about pretty well. Like I said, lots of combo potential. So if a teammate damages someone with something like a burst bomb, you usually have some ability to deal the remaining damage that you need with that. And the better you get at figuring out the flowchart of what type of damage you want to do, the better you're going to be at that weapon. Tri-Slosher, I think, was a little bit overlooked. I think it's definitely not the strongest. Because there are a couple of things about its kit that make it significantly weaker than it has been in the past. One of those things is that it doesn't have the best special in the game. The first one had armor in Splatoon 2. One of those is that it doesn't have a bomb anymore. Having a burst bomb was absolutely insane for this thing in Splatoon 2. And having a splat bomb was also very, very good for the Nouveau kit. And now it's got Toxic Mist, which is just a weaker choice across the board. And people are going to say, wait, but Toxic Mist is really good. It does X, Y, and Z thing. And X, Y, and Z thing are not as good as what a bomb does. It is still useful. It's better to have a Toxic Mist than not to have a sub at all. It's good utility in certain situations, and it can be very annoying to deal with. But annoying is not the same as lethal, which is what a bomb can be. It's not going to stop a Rainmaker push. It's only going to slow it down. It's not going to get someone off the tower. It's just going to take away their ink so that it's difficult for them to stay on for as long as they want to. So that's weaker, and also Inkjet is weaker than it used to be. Now, this is hands down the best Inkjet in the game. It's the second Inkjet weapon in the game. It is one of two. So it feels very silly to say that, but it is a good weapon to have Inkjet on. It's going to be in a similar spot to where, you want to be pushing up to use the Inkjet anyway. Like, you want to be under ledges with this thing, threatening people over the top of them. Well, that's what the Inkjet does. So as soon as you get that special, you can just be like, oh, hey, I was just going to shark this spot with my main weapon, but I can just delete someone now. So that's very useful for that. So, yeah, Tri-Slosher, it's been getting explored a little bit more. Ascension, in particular, in North America, immediately took a shining to the Tri-Slosher. Like, they were using it earlier than anybody else I saw. And we're also seeing it used a little bit more often in Japanese play. Like, I think it definitely has some maps where it pops off. And the Inkjet is, again, not a terrible special. Because even though, like, the reason it was better in Splatoon 2, and even then still a little bit niche, was that you had armor. So if a charger was looking at you, as soon as you inkjetted, you weren't just dead. You would get your shot off. And if you're smart, you're using that shot to take out that E-liter if it's in range to threaten you. And from there, you've got high ground and you're able to take out everybody else. And that's kind of how you had to play it. But you don't have that armor in this game, so it's a little bit more difficult to make use of. But it's still not useless. It can still work. And that sort of aggression, I think, plays well into Splatoon 3, where sometimes you just need to break through. And something that's going to do that relatively consistently with every play it tries to make, that's a solid choice. I should probably put Inkbrush a little bit higher than this. I'd probably put it like hereabouts, but I don't know. It's kind of tough to compare. It's kind of apples to oranges. If you main brush, this ink brush is probably the one I would recommend you use. If you want Zipcaster, then that's cool, but I think more often the Killer Whale is going to give you more consistent benefit, and the bomb is just so good for this weapon. Being able to poke with something that's immediately threatening from a longer range than it can reach with its stubby little arms of a range. Like, it doesn't reach far at all. It's very, very short range. It's less than Dapple Dualies range. It's such a melee weapon that it needs something else ranged to poke with. And I think the Splat Bomb does that better than the Suction Bomb does. The Suction Bomb's great. It's a very useful supportive tool, but it's not going to have the immediate threat that the Splat Bomb is going to. And I think that the Ink Brush can follow up on the Splat Bomb better than it can follow up on the Suction Bomb. And Killer Whale is really nice, and it's really cool because, like I've mentioned before, your ability to move with the brush down while the Killer Whale is active lets you put the Killer Whale shots at different angles than any other weapon in the game is able to, which is really cool. So I still think the Ink Brush is fine. I think if you're a brush player, you play that one, and you're going to be doing just fine. You're going to be playing that sharking playstyle, that ambush playstyle, and you're going to skirmish if you end up in a fight that you can't win. And you can also just sit back and chuck bombs if none of that is working. And all of those are valid, and then you can go back in with the Killer Whale or set up your teammates' fights with the Killer Whale while you're distracting other opponents from a distance. So neat little weapon, and very cool and unique that it's in the game and that it works as well as it does. All right. I am a champion of the Nautilus. I think that the Nautilus is underplayed currently in North America. I think that it is still a completely viable option, despite, everyone looked at it at first and was like, oh, it's got a support kit. Why? But, like, it can be that sort of pseudo anchor and play a little bit more like a heavy Splatling kind of, and still be kind of impactful in that role. Because point sensors are not that bad in this game. You have a lot of choke points that it's very difficult to push through on this map if you can't go through this choke point. And so I'm just going to dump this really big radius of a point sensor on it, and we're going to know you're here. And as soon as this weapon knows you're there, it has some of the fastest DPS in the game that it is going to be able to completely shred you with. So if you're taking a fight with a Nautilus, you'd better know that it's looking at something else or that it doesn't have charge, and otherwise you're in a lot of trouble. I think anybody who still has the mechanics from Splatoon 2 to run like the Inkjet Nautilus, for example, that was really popular then. You can still do pretty much the same things here. It's going to be a little bit less in like the key slayer role where like your entire team is working to set you up, and more in a little bit of a kind of backliney role. But this can still absolutely pop off when it has the paint to work with and it can start to move in. So I don't think it's bad. I think it's a little bit overlooked. But I definitely see some of the weaknesses in its kit and the weakness of not quite having that much paint and needing its teammates to paint for it that are keeping it out of more team comps than its capability, than its ceiling would have you believe. So Ballpoint wants a beacon. Yes, Ballpoint has always wanted a beacon. Inkjet buffs when... I just want Inkjet on more weapons. Let's put it on more weapons first, and then maybe buff it. Maybe give it like Zipcaster armor or something. Like, that would be a nice start. It's big sad for us right now. Why didn't they put it on the T-Tech? Why did they just not put it on the T-Tech? Speaking of the T-Tech, the T-Tech is a phenomenal main weapon, sub-weapon combination. Like, Splattershot plus Splat Bomb is basically the best thing you can possibly give a Splattershot. Like, it is a very, very good 1-2 punch. The special is tremendously mediocre. It is very, very mid. It's not bad. It has some uses, but it is no Booyah Bomb. It is not even close to Booyah Bomb. Booyah Bomb keeps you safe by giving you armor and has like this really, really good aiming where you can put it right at your feet, or you can put it more than halfway across the map at someone. And that keeps you way safer than you ever are when using a Tri-Strike. A Tri-Strike, you can't swim. You can't use your main or sub weapons. If they made it so that you could like use your main weapons while you're throwing this, like it was a... Oh my goodness, someone's honking outside. If you were able to use your main weapon like you could with the bomb rushes in Splatoon 2, that would be so huge for Tri-Strike. I think it would be completely fair. I honestly think it would still be worse than the bomb rushes were then, because then you had the impact for longer and it painted more, and you know those shots were more likely to be lethal. There were a lot of advantages of that over the Tri-Strike. But I think then it would be a really, really, really strong weapon. Like, I would be starting to put it up above the V-Shot if that were something that were true of Tri-Strike, I think. But the fact that you're just a sitting duck with a big glowing thing on your back while you're using it makes it really difficult to use this thing effectively. Because even with, like, the K-Shot, where all you could do when you had missiles up was waddle around really slowly. You fired those missiles by pressing one button, and then you were done with the missiles. So you could actually get into positions where you were, like, taking enemy fire, but ducking behind cover, popping missiles, and then popping out from behind cover before you got flanked from around it. That's not possible with something you have to throw 3 times, and you have to be standing up the entire time while you're doing it. Like, at least missiles you could swim with. At least missiles you fired quickly. And even then, that was one of the biggest disadvantaged states that you could be in. Here, it's just, you're so stuck for so long doing something that's not having that much of an impact, I might note. A Booyah Bomb has a really big radius. A Booyah Bomb, if you throw it directly at someone, they have to run really far, and they have to start running before it lands. Because if they run as it's landing, they're going to get caught by it, and they're going to go down. If they're cornered, they're going to get caught, and they're going to go down. With a Tri-Strike, you're just like, let me take 2 steps to the left sometime in the next maybe 5 seconds or so, and then I'm probably alive. You know, 5 seconds is maybe an exaggeration, but it just never feels anywhere near as threatening. It's only like as threatening as like a torpedo or something. A Booyah Bomb is a lot more than a torpedo. And the fact that there's 3 of them isn't a huge difference. There are some ways that you can throw one like way up in the air and then throw one at the ground so that they land at about the same time, and then you take up a little bit more space, and that's a cool play that you can pull off sometimes. But it's just not the same. It is not a priority special. It's not something that you are actively trying to run on a team comp, I don't think, ever. I think you always prefer a Booyah Bomb to this, and so if you're trying to go for that kind of a displacement special, that's what you run instead. So the special is what's holding this back from being better than the V-Shot. Everything else about it is insanely better, and if they end up buffing Tri-Strike, then I'm a T-Tech main. But it needs a little bit of something for me to think that it's better than having a Suction Bomb, which is almost as good, and a Trizooka, which is way, 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 way better than the Tri-Strike. Like, if you think about this weapon can get you 3 splats. It doesn't even need all 3 shots to get you the 3 splats, because it gets so many collats. This thing can, like, splat so many people. This thing will mildly annoy, like, 2 people at most. I just don't think there's any comparison in terms of the power of the specials, and so even though I much, much prefer a Splat Bomb, I much, much, much prefer a Trizooka. So that's why I'm still going to keep playing V-Shot. Okay, Octobrush. Octobrush, I think, is going to do as well as Zipcaster is currently doing in the meta. If Zipcaster is good, Octobrush good. If Zipcaster is weak, then Octobrush weak. Right now, Zipcaster is kind of aggressively mid. Zipcaster is high risk, moderate reward. And I'm not going to disregard, like, the unique utility you have with the Zipcaster. Like, Zipcaster absolutely does something that no other weapon in the game does, no other special weapon. It can target a player who is unreachable to everybody else. It can bring you and move you to places that you cannot access in any other way. And that's really cool. And it also is really likely to just get shot a lot of the time. It's something that as soon as the Zipcaster is called out, you know, your backliner is going to be panicking, but the support, the crossfire support who's working with the backliner is just going to turn around and help them do 2v1 damage to the Octobrush, because it still has to get up close to someone, and if you're zipcasting to something, you're probably not going to have a lot of cover when you get there. So you're kind of just announcing with a big neon trail, I'm about to be right here, and unless you find a way to attack someone from behind cover, despite having moved there in a straight line and then turned around, which I don't see how you do that without maybe multiple casts and being very surgically precise with the one pick that you're going to be able to get after zipping that many times. It's just not quite up to the level of the top tiers in the game. So I think that special is mid. I think that the weapon is fine. The ink brush is a little bit more mobile, which is nice for it. I don't think the extra range over the ink brush is quite as big of a deal as the mobility is for the ink brush. And it has a slightly worse bomb. So I put it a little bit worse than the ink brush, but if you're a brush player, realistically, you're probably going back and forth between those two, depending on what you need at the time. What I am also seeing a lot of, like, Octobrush and Stamper back and forth, and people are tending to prefer the Stamper right now, so which is why I'm putting this below it. But I don't know. I think Octobrush is fine. I just don't think it's, like, the best option out of all of these. So that's why it's a little bit lower here. Okay. Squeezer would be insane if it had a bomb, has a splash wall instead. I think there's still some places where I like Squeezer a lot. Like, I maintain that Squeezer on Hagglefish is really strong because you can actually use the wall really effectively to push forward through mid, through an area that is unflankable and is just, well, let's put the wall down, fire some shots at a really long range that will clear everybody out, put the wall down a little further forward, get my frontliners really close to those players that we want out of the way, and be able to keep putting down suppressive fire and supporting them in fights. Like, I think that play style that's kind of similar to what a 52 does, just with a little bit more range, is still really great. And it has a lot more range than the 52, so it has a different niche than it has. And it has Trizooka, which is a very valuable special. It's just, you know, not one of the top specials. That sort of midline pressure isn't really what's as valuable right now. It's still going to get walled really hard by Crab Tank. So it's it would be really good against like these weapons' main weapons. The problem is you're not worried about these weapons' main weapons as much as you are the fact that they get Booyah Bomb and Crab really fast. And once there's a Crab in play, this is a much harder weapon to play. You don't have bombs to use to try and throw at it, to try and do a decent amount of chip damage to the armor before running away. You kind of like take 1 or 2 shots and then you're in danger. So the wall isn't going to help you that much because it's going to shred the wall so fast with its rapid fire shots, or it can just hit up over the wall with the explosion. The wall is not helping you at all against a Booyah Bomb, and the Sloshing Machine can hit up over the top of it. So it doesn't have as good of answers to the top tiers currently, and so we're not seeing a lot of use for it. But meta shifts can always bring a weapon back, and while I don't think it's ever going to be quite the tip-top tier, it could definitely still see play, because I think the main weapon special combination is still really good. Mini is possibly the best bubble weapon in the game, and that's a contentious statement. It might be Junior. These two are very, very close. Wait, I would put this actually down here for the same reason I'd put the Junior here. We'll talk about those two a little bit later when we get down to this tier, because I was like, wait, I have exactly the same reasoning for both of these weapons being here. I should just put them in the same spot. Anyway. Slosher, standard Slosher, V-Slosher. Very, very good main weapon, sub-weapon combination. The special is Tri-Strike. Same exact issue that this weapon has. This is a very, very good aggressive midline weapon, and those two things, the main and sub, let it fight basically anything to some degree, pretty capably. It's still going to be a threat against crab tanks. It's still going to be a threat against backline weapons. It's a special threat against backline weapons because it can hit up over the top of ledges. It's got Tri-Strike. So if you're trying to pick a bucket, you want something that has a kit that's firing on all cylinders, that has a main weapon and a sub weapon and a special that it loves. This one only has a sub weapon that it loves. The special is pretty aggressively mid, and so not only does it not have quite the same complete kit that the machine does, but it's so similar to the machine in terms of what it provides that you're almost always just going to see a machine instead. And so somebody who's trying to play this Slosher is trying to play a much more aggressive play style, or they just don't like trying to hit machine directs. But I don't think it's doing anything that much more important than the machine is, and so it's definitely in the outclassed section here. Charger, you basically play this weapon if you want an ink vac, and the times that you want an ink vac are small. Few. There are not that many of them. The E-Leader has more range and also has Wave Breaker, which is much more universally useful. So the times that you would pull this out are pretty niche, but it's still a Charger. It's still one-shots. It still applies the same kind of pressure, just maybe not from as far away as the E-Leader does, but it's a little more mobile. It can move into some situations that the E-Leader can't, and it has a bomb, which is also super nice. So if you want ink vac, then that's probably the way that you're going to get it on most team comps. This is, I'm feeling pretty confident saying it's the best ink vac weapon in the entire game. But ink vac is, like I said, very situational. There are times where you get a lot of value out of it, but you have to set up the entire team positioned around it in a certain way for it to get value. And even then, it's so slow that you're only able to control a certain spot. You're not able to push forward from a certain spot. It's actually a very similar problem to what Big Bubbler has right now, that you can't use this to shove someone out of the way. You can only use this to keep them from moving forward for its duration. And that's not as much value as the other specials in the game are going to give you. So that's here for that reason. Forge, I have said before, is like the best weapon in the game that you probably shouldn't run. The reason you run a Forge on a top-level competitive team... I shouldn't say top-level. The reason you run a Forge on a competitive team, once you're getting to like mid-high level, is that you want a Booyah Bomb, and the player who's got to run the Booyah Bomb doesn't like playing machine and plays shooters better. That's about it. Because this weapon doesn't paint as well, and so it's not going to get the Booyah as quickly as the machine does. Its bomb is not it's not going to have the same amount of value as Fizzy Bomb plus Machine Slosh is going to have. For this weapon, the bomb has to do all the work, whereas here you can combo off the bomb, and this bomb takes up a lot more space, which is better because being able to occupy an entire choke point with a single bomb is really powerful. So I never see a way that if you're really trying to put together the best team comp you can justify putting the Forge in. But it's still a really good weapon. Like, it's not bad. It has ink efficiency problems, and that's probably its biggest weakness. Its DPS is kind of mediocre, especially when you compare it to the Squeezer, but it's solid. It splats reasonably quickly. It is a threat from a longer range than, like, these kinds of weapons, except the VDS. You know, these aggressive weapons they're going to be trying to push in and do stuff. You can wall those off really well with this thing. This thing is really good at splatting those. Like, it's fine. It's just a little slow. It's just a little worse than what else comes above it. So if you're playing this competitively, like, you're not throwing. It's just there might be a better option. This is something that I have been thinking about a lot recently. Like, Wiper... I have so many thoughts about Wiper. Let's talk first about the comparison to what I've said about this previously, because before I put this at a bottom 4 slot, I thought this is one of the worst weapons in the game. And we need to be clear, this is not the same weapon that it was. Okay, this has been buffed. And the buff that it received is a very substantial one. So, just for the sake of getting our sources up here. So, 2.0. Width of the ink launched by horizontal slashes has been increased by about 27%, and the size of terrain inked by falling spray has been increased, so it's easier to connect ink in an uninterrupted straight line. 27% is a massive, massive number. Let's take a look at this weapon really quick, the Kensa 52 Gal. It was... let me find it. Okay. It was this patch, 5.4. This was the patch where the K-Gal became meta. It wasn't any of this stuff, although this stuff had been building up and was helping it over time. The one thing that made people realize and, like, try and use it and see, oh my god, wait, this thing is incredibly powerful, was this 27% inking buff. That is the same size of the buff that the Splatana Wiper received. But now, not only is this paint going to be greater and, like, get it special faster, it's also going to let it move faster. Because you're going to get an uninterrupted straight line much quicker. It's smoother paint to swim through. This stuff is a big deal. It may not seem like it, because, you know, the big complaint that I always had about this was that it had low DPS, and that isn't answered here. But it is going to help compensate for it in a pretty significant way. Now, the reason that this kind of buff is not going to make it as big as the K52 was is, well, there are a couple of reasons. First of all, it hasn't been getting buffed up until this point, up until this, like, tipping point. This is the first buff it's ever received, so it still has a lot of the same weaknesses. Another thing is that Hammer is really, really holding this weapon back. Now, it can use Hammer. Hammer's not, like, a complete mismatch with it. It's just that Hammer is undertuned. That Hammer really has a fundamental flaw that there's not really a super safe way to use it. If you made it super safe to use at melee range, it might be overpowered, and so you might want to avoid making it that strong. It's just not great. So the fact that it gets this painting buff means less for the Splatana Wiper than it meant for the Kensa 52 Gal, which was able to use that painting buff to get a Booyah Bomb, which has always been one of the strongest special weapons in the entire game. The K-52 was also able to use that to increase its tankiness, its defensiveness. It synergized really well with Booyah Bomb. So, like I said, like this, it synergizes with the hammer. It's just the hammer is itself the problem. But it also has Torpedo, and Torpedo has never been a bad thing about it. I think Torpedo is one of the reasons that this weapon isn't like... even back when I thought it was one of the worst weapons in the game, it wasn't the worst, and Torpedo was one of the biggest reasons for that, because it has damage combos, and Torpedoes are just universally useful. If the rest of your kit is absolutely god-awful, you can still just Torpedo spam, and that's still a halfway useful weapon. So we end up in this place where it's got a lot of new painting ability, which is improving its mobility, which is improving its paint output. It's improving its special, acquisition for whatever that's worth. And that makes a big difference for a weapon. The weapon does have a one-shot. And the biggest thing, I think, above all else, that has shifted my opinion of the Splatana Wiper, besides its painting buff, which is massive, is that it does insane damage to Crab Tank. You can just, do rapid-fire shots on the Crab Tank, and it's what is it, 6 shots or something? It's some obscenely small number of shots that you need to hit the Crab Tank armor with to just shred it immediately. It's so little. So this thing happens to counter, in some small way, what is meta at the moment. Hammer is also kind of a weak counter to Crab Tank in some situations, because it does massive DPS, and it can be thrown from a very great distance, and does massive DPS when it lands. So it does a really good job of being able to damage that Crab Tank enough that maybe a teammate can shred it. And it can also just kind of shred it with a main weapon. So the problem with this weapon, and the reason why I'm putting it as low as I am, is that, again, it has abysmal DPS. I regularly win 1v1s against really strong players on Splatana Wipers, because they just physically cannot do enough damage with their weapon. They can make me miss a lot more than I make them miss, and I still beat them because I have a Splattershot and they have a Splatana Wiper. As soon as this runs into a good frontline weapon and it's anywhere near in range of them, it's just dead. And so it has to play really evasively. It has to play either expecting to die a lot, which is what people are starting to do with it now. They're actually running it like it's a Tetra Dualies and putting a ton of quick respawn on it, and just diving into the enemy team with another teammate so that they can help with paint support, range support. It kind of works in that role, because what you try to do is you get the opponents to focus on the other player, and then the Splatana Wiper is at a relatively safe distance, doing its relatively low damage, but damage enough that's able to shift things in their favor. It's able to throw a torpedo in there for extra damage before it goes in. It has the melee range stuff. It has some stuff that it can do if it's trying to rush forward. But again, it needs support from the team to be able to do any of that, and I just don't... I'm not convinced enough that it can beat Tetras right now. I still feel like Tetras are better for its niche. I feel like it can play that role. But man, when I see Splatana Wipers go in, I'm seeing them feed like Tetras. I'm not seeing them slay like Tetras. And until that's the case, I'm always going to feel like this is going to be a weaker choice and that it's a little bit outclassed. And I say this having played against Pika from Cherry Limeade, having played against Arashi from Last Resort. These are players on teams that should absolutely be wiping the floor with me, that are better mechanically, that are better in their decision making. And sometimes I'm just wait, I can just kill them right now, and there's nothing they can do about that. And that's their weapon's fault. So they have to be getting enough value that being possible is worth it, before I will say, okay, yeah, run Splatana Wiper over Tetra Dualies. So that's where I'm at on that. Okay. Reef-Lux is something that you have to consider because it gets missiles faster than anything else, and that is the only reason you have to consider it. The main weapon, like we've talked about before, is really low damage, and the sub-weapon does barely anything for it, frankly. I think it would rather have most other sub-weapons in the game than have a curling bomb. And I've talked before about how I have a very low opinion of curling bombs in general. I think that the mobility that they provide is useful for weapons that want to get forward and want to attack you, and even then, I would still probably rather have a splat bomb. So part of this is coming from my curling bomb hate, but also I just have not seen anyone showing that they can slay with the main weapon yet. If you're able to pop off with the main weapon, like if you're able to actually win some fights and be more helpful in a team fight context, then the combination of the main weapon and the special is strong enough, especially with the way that the main weapon paints, that I'm like, okay, yeah, start running this weapon instead of something like Flingza. But I think Flingza is stronger all around, despite getting fewer missiles. And so I think that will be the missile weapon of choice for the time being, for the near future. These weapons here, there are some situations where I'm like, yeah, this weapon can work. And then there are other situations where I'm like, why are you running that? Like, there is definitely something better. And I think I put it there. Okay. I'm going to leave it there. So let's talk about what those niches are with each of the weapons. With Blaster, it's largely tower control, because it's a combination of having a Blaster and tower control, which is awesome, because a Blaster and tower control is able to clear people off the tower really effectively with its AoE damage, and having Big Bubbler and tower control, which is a way to defend the tower as it pushes through especially a valuable checkpoint. Now, that's a little bit of a mismatch with this particular weapon, because a lot of the time you want the Blaster to be further ahead than the tower, so it'll either stay on tower and not be a factor pushing forward, or it'll push forward and not be a factor defending the tower. And it's a little bit annoying trying to play it in that way, because I've played this weapon quite a bit early on in the game's lifespan, and I've been playing it less since. But also, Big Bubbler has been falling off because people are just shredding it really fast. Big Bubbler is something that has maybe like 4 seconds of uptime against the team that focuses it down if you don't have control in front of the Big Bubbler already. And if you have control in front of the Big Bubbler already, what extra space is the Big Bubbler earning you? It's maybe like a little bit of an insurance policy in case you don't get hit by like a stray Charger shot or something. But it's not going to stay up for so long that the Charger's not going to be able to just charge and fire another shot. Big Bubbler cannot let you push the tower. It only helps you protect the tower while you're already pushing. And so having something like a Booyah Bomb that will actually move people, or a Crab Tank that will actually prevent people from entering the space for a longer amount of time and do damage, those are much higher priority than Big Bubbler is at the moment. So Big Bubbler would actually probably need an HP buff in order to be as valuable as it currently is. Obviously, like, it's weaker on tower, and they've designed it that way, and that's part of the reason why, you know, it's going to get shredded so quickly on tower. It's going to be shredded a lot less quickly on the ground, but even so, it's going to get shredded at some point. And that helps with certain weapons to play selfishly, because it keeps them safe and forces people to walk into their range to be able to contest it. So that's the reason that Battle Jr. is stronger in this game than it ever has been before, because getting into junior range is actually a problem against that weapon. It has deceptively good DPS. But it's not enough, I think, for this weapon. It's not enough to offset the fact that this weapon, despite slaying really well, also doesn't paint very well. And so the main weapon is just weak enough, and the special is just weak enough that I'd only really consider it for tower control, and that's if you have someone who's like a dedicated blaster main. A lot of the time, I probably just prefer one of these frontline weapons up here instead of that. Splat Dualies are excellent if they're paired with Tetra Dualies. And that's about it. You want them to be with the Tetra Dualies for this exact reason. You want a Crab Tank, but you want a weapon that is going to be able to push into enemy ink with the Tetras more effectively. And so it is with that kind of niche situation where, like, you need something that can dive even harder than this weapon can. And don't get me wrong, this weapon can dive. Like, this weapon is a lightweight shooter with a very high fire rate. Like, this thing can schmoove, but this thing can move through enemy ink, and this thing cannot. So that makes this a little bit more effective at following up on the crazy, stupid things that a Tetra Dualies are going to do. And so if you want a Crab Tank, this weapon, it's not going to get the crab tank quite as quickly, but it's going to have that extra utility, and so there's a niche. Dapple Dualies. People are running this at top level in Japan on Rainmaker, and that's it. That's all I'm seeing. But in Rainmaker, it allows you to play it with a very fast pace of play. It lets you get beacons to let you jump back into the map sooner and not give up map control as quickly. And Tacticooler is somewhat valued in Rainmaker, specifically because you can move the Rainmaker faster with it, and that makes your pushes move quicker. The other utility of the Tacticooler isn't quite as important as all of that stuff, although the respawn time definitely helps, especially when paired with beacons. But you're basically running Dapples for that combination of utility. It has some fighting utility. The dodge roll, especially with latent netcode like we've got in Splatoon 3, is basically a teleport. It is very, very difficult to follow. You're probably just not going to predict where it ends up, and so you're going to have to be reacting while it is already aware of where you are. So at close range, you get up against this weapon, you should always lose with pretty much every weapon in the game. I can't think of another weapon that loses... that this weapon loses to if it gets into range. But getting into range is, of course, the problem. And it has absolutely no tools to do that. So its whole objective is going to be turbo feeding. Zap is kind of in a similar place, but it's a much better rounded weapon. It just doesn't have the beacons. So you're playing this if you want Tacticooler and you want more of a weapon, as opposed to more of a utility, like remember how some Pokemon used to be HM slaves? This is an HM slave, whereas this is something that can actually fight, that you've just given Surf to, because that happens to be a useful move for it, both in combat and in being able to move somewhere. That's kind of how I view it. So the N-Zap is a much more reliable kind of frontline shooter type with a bomb, which is all good, and it also gets Tacticooler, which, if you want the Tacticooler, solid thing to run. Jet has the same problem as Splat Charger, which is that it has Ink-Fac. And Ink-Fac is only useful in so many places, but it will get Ink-Fac very quickly and reliably. It will still have backline pressure and presence, and it will paint a lot, which can take some of the pressure off of your teammates. Not that any of the meta weapons are having any trouble with painting whatsoever, so that's not quite as important as it used to be, but it gets Ink-Fac very quickly, and there are some places where you do actually get some good use out of an Ink-Fac. We're seeing a lot of it in, I think, Tower Control. And so there's like Area Cup, and then there are other like mode-specific tournaments, like they've done Rainmaker. And I believe there was a Tower Control one that I saw recently. Let me double-check this here. There was one here. Was it this? Man, this would be so much easier if I read Japanese. Can I get a translate button? Translate to English. There we go. Darn it. I don't know what that word means. I think it was this one, but I might be wrong. One of the ones was Tower Control, and we ended up seeing it a lot because you could just put the VAC on Tower, and that was a more sure way to get yourself through a checkpoint than something like a big bubbler ended up being. And it wants to play at about the range that you would fire an Ink-Fac shot at. Ink-Fac shot from. That said, the Ink-Fac itself is going to be less effective from that range, so you're usually using it again as like a defensive tower thing. And then you can play from further back with the main weapon. That's my guess about how that thing is working, because I'm not seeing it a lot outside of like these few top Japanese teams that are playing it, but I think it has at least that niche. Yeah, Google Translate doing literally nothing for us. So again, there are some situations where an Ink-Fac can work, and in those situations this is fine, but there aren't that many of those situations. Okay, now we get to the bubbler spam weapons. Mini is, I think, the better of the two, because the main weapon is nuts. The main weapon is just great range, great charge time. It's a threat from a lot of different places. It has a relatively high fire rate still. It moves quickly. There are a lot of good things about the Mini Splatling, and it has never been a bad weapon. They just keep giving it kits that nerf it really badly. The one kit of it that had missiles in Splatoon 2 was nuts and was meta for a while. Like, it has that potential. It just keeps getting held back by its kits. Toxic Mist is not what it wants. Nothing really wants Toxic Mist over any individual other thing. There are some weapons that can use it better than others, like I think Tri-Stringer is actually a pretty good call for it. Tri-Slosher can definitely use it, but like you'd still rather have something else on those weapons. And same deal for Mini here. It's not that it's bad for it, it's just you get less out of that than you get out of other things. And Big Bubbler, like I said, falling out of favor at the moment, and so it's not going to be at the forefront anymore. The advantage you have with Junior, rather than range, is bomb spam. So do you want a solid midline weapon with decent DPS and really good paint output, or do you want a short-range shooter with really good paint output, and instead of the relying on the crossfire utility, the DPS, you're relying on it to throw a bunch of bombs and play supportively? I'd say that there are niches for each, but I slightly favor the Zimmy. And maybe, I don't know, in some situations I might favor the Junior instead, but also both of them are niche, not just because like you'd take one or the other depending on the situation, but because you only want Big Bubbler in so many different places. I would probably only run it on zones and tower control right now. Rainmaker, it seems like an absolute waste because you're going to move so far past the Bubbler anytime you use it that it's just a selfish special completely. And Clam Blitz has a similar problem to Rainmaker. It's a little bit better in Clam Blitz because when the basket is open, having the bubble up there is more useful because the objective is static. And you know you're just going to be trying to control that one space for a longer time instead of trying to move someplace else. But anytime you have to move, the Big Bubbler becomes much less useful. Because the Big Bubbler is not going to move there with you unless you put it on the tower or something. And then another Bubbler weapon. The Squiffer is basically like... We see it get used on like Inkblot because you can jump shot over the top of their plat. Like you see it in certain places where being able to hit jump shots is useful. But that's really niche. There are very few times that that's really something that you care about that much. Point sensor is fine, but it's not like you'd really kind of prefer it have maybe something for its own mobility or something that like maybe a burst bomb so it can do damage when it doesn't have charge ready. It kind of leaves it out high and dry a little bit with the kit. You really have to be hitting your shots very reliably. And even then, there's some angles where you just kind of can't do stuff because you're a line of sight weapon that doesn't have an insanely good range. And so sometimes you're just like, well, they're in there. I know they're in there. I know exactly what angle I would have to shoot at to hit them, and I just don't have that angle available to me, and I don't have any way to flush them out. So there's absolutely nothing I can do except either stand here or back up. And that's a big weakness in a weapon, not being able to deal with that kind of a situation where someone's holed up. Bloblobber, I'm on the fence about because this kit is not great for it. It's kind of the weaker two parts of its kit from Splatoon 2. But it does paint a lot. And on zones, I'm like, if you want to paint spam on zones, that's useful. If you want to use the rain for a Rainmaker push, like that can be useful. We saw some use out of that on like Rainmaker in Splatoon 2, where you would use it for its very good ability to pop the Rainmaker shield. And so you could like feed the Rainmaker in, be in a 3v4 and still out-pop them on the Rainmaker shield because you had a Bloblobber, and keep just exploding the Rainmaker and pushing it forward like crazy. Like that's a strategy that could work. That's something that like FLC talked about and that saw some use, at the very least in mid-level NA competitive play. So it's like there are some places where you could use it. It's just kind of slow. And slow is not great in this game. Once you get into a place, you're able to lock that area down, and like you've got a lot of paint, and so you're going to be able to hold the zone really well. But if you're trying to push forward, it's going to do that really slowly because it doesn't want to risk getting too close to someone and having to like hit this crazy one shot that may not even be possible depending on how far away they are, because of their ability to dodge the blobs as they come at them. So I'll leave it here. It's close to being lower. Okay. I think that's what I'm going to call it there. So these are weapons that it's like, I'm just not seeing competitive players pick these. But, like, you could, and you could probably still get pretty high in, like, X power. Like, I'm seeing Glooga's players get up to, like, 2,700 or something like that. You know, 96, it's not bad. It's still a powerful main weapon. Carbon, it gets Zipcaster, and it can use Zipcaster decently well. Bamboo is still decent. I think L3 is still, like... In terms of crab tank weapons, it's not one of the worst, and I think it's underexplored. Even really, if Splash weren't in the game, it would be one of the best weapons in the game, I think, because it gets the crab tank. But because it's there, it's like, there's not really that much of a reason to use it, but it's also still really solid. I'd put probably both Rapids in there. I'd put this Bucket in there. I'd put this Mini in there. This is going to be controversial. I'm actually going to put the Splatbrella in here. I think that this weapon is slept on a little bit. Only a little bit. Still not great, but it's there. This weapon gets Crab Tank. It's like, it can work a little bit. What else belongs here? I really want to put Tent here, but I don't feel like I can at the moment. Do I want to put Sploosh here? I don't think I want to put Sploosh here. And then, oh, Gootuber, wait. Gootuber, I'm actually going to put that here at the very bottom of this tier, where it's like, it gets missiles and it has torpedo. And that automatically is going to make a weapon something you have to consider. But with missiles being nerfed, and with the other options like Flingza being favored over it, even Reef-Lux at this point for like main weapon, I would say it's solidly a tier lower, but I'd say it still goes up there. Is there anything else I want to put here? Splat Roller for sure. I'd put the Inkbrush Nouveau up here. I think its kit is god-awful, but it's still a good main weapon. And that counts for something. Here's the thing with Snipe Rider. If it was main weapon, I would maybe consider it even being up like this kind of area. But its kit is awful. Its kit is the worst. Ugh. So bad for it. Whoa, chill. We gotta pop up. So, I don't know whether I want to put it here. I feel like there's not enough of its kit that works to put it up there yet. I don't know. Do any of these have main weapons that are like useful, especially good? I think all of these are relatively weak main weapons, honestly. The Lunas are giving them a run for their money. Okay. And let's just get the rest of these placed. I think I've got that sorted decently well. These are definitely ordered. This one might go up. These are pretty interchangeable. Yeah, we'll put that there. Okay. There. Okay. Now it's complete. Okay. So for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, you're probably very confused about why I have vanished. Currently, the cat is in my lap, and so I'm not allowed to move, which is what I would need to do to fix my webcam, which froze. So, in place of my webcam, we now have a picture of the cat. And as soon as he chooses to leave, as soon as he is done purring here and being a very good kitty, then we will be back. But going back to it, So this, we haven't talked about even this tier up here yet, so let's go through these. Glooga Dualies, this is flawed, probably avoid competitively, but also not the worst. Glooga Dualies are a booyah weapon that's just kind of outclassed by the machine. Okay, cat has left my lap, fixing webcam. Success. There's my forehead, everybody. I hope you enjoy it. All right. So Gloogas, they cannot do what Ren described, as we talked about earlier, as trash damage. They cannot just dump a bunch of hitboxes in a certain area and expect that... you can kind of just expect that to do stuff for you with something like the Fizzy Bomb on the machine, and the Gloogas cannot do that. The only damage that you're getting from a Glooga Dualies is either the main weapon or every now and then again you get a Booyah Bomb. And the main weapon's fire rate is awful. And that is the biggest weakness of the weapon by far, that it's so aim intensive because you get so few shots. So you have to hit them, and you probably have to have rolled to hit them because then you get the 2-shot instead of the 3-shot. 3-shotting with this weapon is just not a good look, especially when it's going back and forth from one dually to another. So you really want to be rolling, so you're forced to roll and hit your shots in order to do really reliable damage. Now, yes, you've got a wall to work with, and the wall is spaced really well around your roll. So for that reason, I put it up this high instead of putting it maybe even a tier lower. But the amount of paint that it's putting out is just not enough. And so it's going to be outclassed by almost every other Booyah weapon. But it does provide some midline pressure, and at a high level, with a high level of skill, like, this is a dangerous thing that you have to respect. In terms of its ability to fight, you can't just stay in its sight line and expect to be okay. It does do stuff. So it definitely has flaws. It's a really, really big liability in terms of paint. It's not going to get as many Booyah Bombs as the other weapons will, and it's not going to do damage as consistently or reliably unless you're really, really hyper skilled at it. But it can do some stuff, and so it's kind of middle of the road here. 96 as a main weapon is good but slow, kind of a similar problem to Bloblobber. But the 96 is a really dangerous weapon to fight. It just doesn't need to hit you that many times, and so it controls space pretty darn well around it. If you walk into a 96's zone, it's going to get enforced pretty quickly and pretty reliably. Even just hitting one shot with a 96 is often enough with weapons that have this much chip damage that you're able to do stuff off of that. So solid, just ink vac holding it back quite a bit. Sprinkler, not what it wants. It'll get its ink vac faster, but it would much prefer to be using that sprinkler to get a better special. It actually wasn't the worst when it had the sprinkler with ink armor, because it wanted a lot of ink armor, and so it could paint for it pretty decently well, because it could be painting with the main weapon and with the sprinkler at the same time. But still not the best option even then, and now that it has a much more situational special, you're very rarely going to have a reason that you want to run this over other stuff. Carbon Roller. Carbon Deco really boxes this out of its niche super hard because it doesn't have a Burst Bomb, and the Carbon Deco does. So it's really hard to justify. Zuka is also just straight up a tier above Zipcaster for reliable offense. So, Zipcaster is fun, and it has some unique utility, and it synergizes really well with the Carbon Roller, but for consistency's sake, if you're trying to play that ambush roller play style, I don't see very many reasons that you want a Zipcaster over an Inkzuka, and I definitely don't see any reason that you don't want the Burst Bomb that the Carbon Deco has. Bamboo is in a controversial kind of position, because some people are saying it's absolute trash. Some people are saying, no, it's still fine. I think it's kind of in the middle of those two things. It, again, probably wants another kit than the one it has, and it has to play really, really defensively, because that's what it's best at doing. It can put the Autobomb out to figure out if people are sharking it, and it can keep its distance really well by knowing where they are, but pushing forward is going to be really hard, and there are other weapons that are going to hold ground better than it will. It's a much more difficult wall to break through with a Sloshing Machine, where you can just chuck a fizzy bomb in some random direction and keep someone out of an area, than if you need to hit a pinpoint accurate Bamboozler shot to keep them out of that same area. Especially if you have, combo potential off of the sub-weapon, whereas with the bamboo, your hitbox is so much smaller that, like, hitting those two bamboo shots is much harder than hitting, some sloshing machine damage after you hit them with the fizzy bomb, whatever that ends up being. So much less reliable and much more aim intensive. And so I think it's worse for its role, the role that it used to play, than it was in Splatoon 2. But the lack of MPU is not the reason that I'm putting it lower, because I think that the weapon still functions without the MPU just fine. It's a little bit weaker, but it's a lot more specific a situation than a lot of people would say that it was. So I think the mid-tier here is fine. L3, I think I've already explained, gets Crab Tank, but is worse in every other way than the Splash. And the V-Dualies has a niche because of its unique utility to be able to roll over enemy ink. L3 doesn't have that either. So it has a little bit more range, and that's about all it's got over any of those two weapons. And its playstyle is just kind of passive, kind of slow, not really what you're looking for when you need to take full advantage of every opportunity that you get to move up. The curling bomb is going to help it a little bit, but the curling bomb is not going to make it safe when it gets there. And that's its big problem as a weapon. It's very aim intensive. It needs 2 shots to splat. So it's just kind of not doing enough with the main weapon to justify painting really well and getting crab. This Rapid is a very solid main weapon. It's just cursed with having very mid specials. And I think it's like Mine and Toxic Mist between the two. So like the subs aren't helping it any either. If you give one of these things a torpedo, I don't care what special it really has. Like, it's already a much better weapon. So we saw what that could do with the K-Rapid. A burst bomb would also be insane for one of these things. Like these, it only takes a better kit to immediately have these being a factor in the meta. But right now, they're just really held back by what they've got. I'd say that is true for both of them, for both the Tri-Strike and for the Ink Vac. I don't think Tri-Strike is good enough to be worth running it. And I think that's the one that has Ink Mine, which is the lesser of the two subs. So, yeah, they're not doing well with their kits, but their main weapons can absolutely be stronger than they currently are. They just need another kit. Slosher, this could go higher, depending on what people are able to figure out with it. It's still very new. Line Marker is the worst sub in the game still, I think. A little bit of a range buff I don't think is enough to make that worth running at all. But at least it's going to let you see things, I guess, sort of. I don't know. The Zipcaster is very cool, and the potential of Slosher plus Zipcaster isn't explored enough yet, I don't think, but I think it is something that is worth trying out, at least for the time being. I think that's like the most underexplored of the weapons that are on this list right now. So Slosher Deco has some interesting combinations of damage over the top of ledges with Zipcaster, which I don't think have been fully explored yet, and I'm waiting to see more about. But the Line Marker is making me think, and the Zipcaster being a little bit outclassed right now is making me think, It may have more potential than other Zipcaster weapons. We'll have to see, but for now, I'm pessimistic. Mini Splatling, again, phenomenal weapon except for the hammer. If it weren't for the hammer, this weapon would potentially be a top tier. Because Burst Bomb plus Mini Splatling is just a phenomenal combination. And I'm sad that they wasted the Burst Bomb kit on having hammer, which is just not a fit for this weapon at all. At least with something like the Splatana Wiper, the hammer makes some sense because you're trying to get behind the front lines and like use it to splat people. With the Mini, all you're ever going to do is throw that thing. At the range that you want to be playing at, like, you're not going to shark in there with a Mini. That's not what you're itemizing to do. So it's just kind of a waste on that weapon. Splatbrella, I think the Splat Brawler like is a little bit higher up than people are giving it credit for. Obviously, there are a lot of bugs, and those bugs are really inhibiting its ability to have as much of an impact as it could. But I think if this weapon were more functional, it could go up a tier or two. It's not bad. It's a little bit mediocre in terms of its damage output, and that's something that players have been complaining about even without knowing the bugs, but the main weapon is still functional. It gets Tri-Strike, which is very mid, but the main weapon, I think, it as long as they fix it, the main weapon can definitely be used. And Tri-Strike isn't like a death sentence to a weapon. It's just, you could probably do better. So I'm going to put it here, and I think that's a safe place for it. Splattershot Pro is hopelessly outclassed because there are many, many weapons that have crab that are better than it. Especially better than a version of it that has line marker. So it's a Splattershot Pro, which is not a bad weapon, like I've said. It's, not better than a Squeezer. It doesn't paint very much, but it's not a bad weapon. And Crab Tank is the best special in the game. So, I can't put this any lower than it is currently because of those two things. But Line Marker is the worst sub-weapon in the game, and it is also probably the weakest crab weapon in the game. So, yeah, it's down pretty low right now. Splat Roller, I feel like just completely loses its niche as soon as Carbon Deco hits the game. Big Bubbler is one potential thing that would keep it up there, except that Big Bubbler is also declining in popularity. So it has taken a pretty significant hit in terms of its particular utility. It does have the Curling Bomb, and that's something that does give the Splat Roller unique utility over other weapons. Just the Splat Roller and the Sploosh. Any kind of aggressive sharking weapon would benefit from those, but I don't think that's anywhere near enough. I have a low opinion of Curling Bomb even on weapons like this, so I don't know. Not my favorite. Oh, hey, Devi's here. Devi. I have a question for you. These 4 weapons right here, Heavy Splatling, Ballpoint, Tri-Stringer, Hydra. What order do you put those in? That's my question to you. I will probably adjust based on that. If you even think that they belong in different tiers, I would probably listen to that. Okay, while Devi gets that answer out, we'll talk about the Inkbrush Nouveau. Inkbrush is a great main weapon, and that's why it's up as far as it is, but the kit is not great. Mines, you can use them as a brush, they're annoying because the brush can put them into places where most weapons can't normally reach, and it can just kind of safely get them there. So it can make for some nice ambushes in some niche situations, but at the pace that the game is played at top level, the brush probably doesn't get to just live in the enemy base for a long time before the 4v3 it's creating by not being there with its team ends up going badly in its team's favor. So those kinds of strats, I feel, are much more prevalent at lower levels, and that unless you're letting this brush live in your base without really dealing with it, which is something that won't happen very often at high level, the brush isn't going to get a lot of use out of those. And Hammer, we've talked about Hammer. It's not great. It's the weakest special in the game in all likelihood. So the Nouveau is not a phenomenal kit right now, and both the sub and the special will need buffs for it to ever be considered over the standard ink brush in competitive play. Hold on. Hydra and Tri are where they are ballpoint down one. Got it. All right. So like this. I see. So that brings us back. Now we're going to spend some time talking about the weak weapons. These are the ones where... Okay. This tier... I'm never going to run these on a competitive team. I'm never going to suggest that someone on my competitive team run these until the game changes. But these are weapons where I can at least see why someone might want to run one. So the Aerospray is very simply a booyah spam weapon, and that is all that it's going to do. And there's probably going to be some very niche situation where even a high-level team finds a reason to use it. Just like there was with the Silver Aerospray in Splatoon 2. If you really need booyah spam, there's your Booyah spam. Now, the Sloshing Machine gives you so much more than Booyah spam, and it doesn't even get Booyah that slowly. So, I'm never going to recommend playing the Arrow Spray over the machine, but maybe on, like, some map mode that a team has practiced in advance and they're coming up with a gimmick pick here, having that many Booyahs is kind of helpful sometime. That's the only thing I can give it. Sprinkler is absolutely useless for combat. It is only good for farming more Booyahs. And the main weapon is absolutely useless for combat. It is only good for farming more Booyahs. If you need to get on, like if you play it like a sharking style, you can sometimes get on top of someone and it has a pretty fast kill time if the shots don't miss, if you're like right on top of them, which is where you need to be anyway to hit them. So like, it's not like, it's like a discount sploosh at that range, which isn't a terrible thing to have, but that's definitely nothing that you're trying to drop everything else that you can get Booyah on in order to play. So I would definitely say it's the weakest Booyah Bomb getting weapon in the entire game. Even though it gets more Booyah Bombs than anything else. Because a special alone, paint alone, cannot carry a weapon in competitive Splatoon. Clash Blaster. Everyone's like, well, it has a niche in tower control. And I'm like, okay, but like, why not any other blaster? Literally any other blaster. The reason that I'm putting this the vaguest amount above the Lunas is that it gets one of the best offensive kits in the entire game. It has Splat Bomb and it has Trizooka. Splat Bomb Trizooka is something that I would play a lot of weapons if they had it. Like if you put that on a Splattershot, that Splattershot is a top tier. Like that is a better kit than the vanilla Splattershot has. That is a better kit than the Tentatek Splattershot has currently. So, I mean, that part is great. But the main weapon still stinks. The main weapon, the advantage of the main weapon, and this is, I think, Nintendo designing the game for all levels of play. Because the main weapon, one nice thing about it is that it's very hard to miss with. It is very easy, because the hitboxes are just so large. You are going to do an amount of damage very likely if you just aim this thing in someone's general direction. The problem is it's not anywhere near enough damage quickly enough against someone who can actually aim something like a Splattershot or a 52 Gal or even Tetra Dualies. It just does not splat somebody quickly enough. And so a lot of the time with most weapons, the way that you fight this thing is you just stand and tank the damage and kill it before it kills you. Or you outrange it, because its range is really pretty weak compared to any of the midline weapons or any of the backline weapons. So it's one of those two things that you're going to have as a counter strategy against that main weapon pretty much every time it fights you. So, yeah, it can clear the tower with consistent damage, but why not do that with a vanilla blaster? Why not do that with a range blaster? Why not do that with a rapid blaster? Why not do that with, like, any of the other AoE options that you have at your disposal? Why not do that with a machine? Like, why not do that with a Flingza Roller? Why not do that with an Explo? If that's the only thing you're bringing it for, there are, like, a double-digit number of options that do that same thing but better. So I see no reason to use a Clash Blaster, even though it has one of the best kits in the game. I think that it is that poor of a main weapon at a competitive level. Luna Blasters are a lot different. Luna Blasters are the kind of the extreme end of the ambush weapon playstyle. They are going to try and shark, and they're going to try and get one-shots. And if they can do that, they can be very effective. The problem is you need a ton of paint for them to do that. They don't have that much range, and yeah, they've got a bigger explosion radius, and so they'll hit over ledges a little bit better, but that doesn't really compensate for the lack of range that you get from something like a vanilla blaster. And the kits are just generally worse. Like I've talked about Zipcaster, it's like, ew, it's so close to being good. It's so close to having something special that no other weapon has, but it's just like not quite there. So that's great. That's not as great for it. It does have a great bomb. Like I wouldn't ask for another bomb on a Luna. Like Splat Bomb Luna is phenomenal, but it's so ink hungry that can you get away with throwing the bomb all the time? You can't really spam it, and you're not going to paint very much at all if all you're doing is throwing bombs. So I think the main weapon just doesn't quite paint enough, just doesn't quite have enough range, just isn't quite fast enough. Like, even though it's a lightweight weapon, the fact that you have to fire so many shots just to move is a weak aspect of it. So I'm not liking it as much. And then the Kensaluna is interesting because Kensaluna actually has a mobility sub, which is something that the weapon can actually use really well. Like, next to a curling bomb for straight up mobility, a fizzy bomb is actually the next best sub for you to have, unless you're like super duper slow, in which case you might need a burst bomb instead. But fizzy bomb gives you this really long trail if you just throw an uncharged one at your feet, and it can use that. Problem is, it has hammer. So hammer doesn't do anything that the Luna can't already do by itself. There are some situations where the hammer will one-shot that the Luna would have to two-shot, and that's about it. But it can still hit over ledges the same way that the hammer can. It can shark the same way the hammer can, less predictably and less conspicuously than the hammer can. The only thing it can't do is throw it, but at least has fizzy bombs that it can throw at you from a distance. So it's like so little extra that the hammer gives it, and hammer, again, not great. So, unfortunate. Dapple's Nouveau. Dapple Dualies, in general, are just a weak main weapon. They are powerful at very close range. They are one of the most powerful weapons in the game at their range. But their range sucks. So, pretty much everything in the game is just going to kite it back. Like, even a Splattershot. A Splattershot never gets to kite anything. But I kite Dapple Dualies with the Splattershot. It's just too short of range to be that functional as a projectile weapon. It needs to shark to get picks. It needs to like dodge roll through enemy ink to get picks. And even then, if somebody's watching for it, it's probably going to get found. The dodge rolls are quick, but they don't go that far. A brush can put the brush down and just run away through enemy ink no matter how far they have to go. But the Dapples, as soon as they've used both rolls, they haven't gotten that far away from you, and they're probably still in range of you if you're a longer ranged weapon. So it's not anywhere near as good for getting out of danger as something like a brush, which would play a similar role otherwise. So Dapples need to be kind of saved by their kit. And to be fair, Torpedo is a phenomenal pairing with the Dapple Dualies. Unfortunately, Reef Slider is not. Reef Slider is one of the weakest specials in the game, and people are arguing that it might actually be worse than Splashdown was in Splatoon 2. I don't know that I'd go that far, but it's as situational as the Splashdown is, because it is absolutely very easy to splat you out of a Reef Slider. You just have to do it in a different way than you did with Splashdown. With Splashdown, you stop the special from ever happening, but there's a high skill check to prevent it from happening. With Reef Slider, you stop it after it has executed. Like, they use the Reef Slider, and you either get them in the frames before it starts up and they have invincibility, or you get them at the end when they're frozen in place for a little while, and something like an E-Leader can literally just hold its laser at the point where it ends and fire the shot as soon as the explosion happens and splat the player. So while it synergizes with an aggressive special like that, it's a weak aggressive special. And so it's not enough to save the weapon. If this had something like the Torpedo kit, but like maybe it had... Give this thing... What do you want to give this thing? What's an aggressive special that you'd like to have? I mean, Booyah Bomb wouldn't be terrible, but it'd probably get shredded if it was playing that close. Maybe give it Trizuka or something. Wavebreaker. Just, if it had a solid special, I could see this being up even a couple of tiers. I could see this being up with the other Dapple Dualies, but the other Dapple Dualies give a lot of support, and like its kit is what makes that weapon what it is, and this weapon's kit is just not quite there. Again, Torpedoes, I might consider moving it up a tier for the Torpedoes, but it's still not phenomenal. The Pencil. The Pencil, as a main weapon, is really cool. I like it a lot, and I would put it up above the Bamboo probably, because it's kind of just like a longer ranged Bamboo. There are obviously some differences there, but that's kind of how it's going to function, and so I think it's going to be like a little bit better than Bamboo in that role. The problem a little bit better than Bamboo. It might not work for some damage combos. There are some teams that might not want to use it because it only does 60. But I think for the most part, like, it just in a 1v1 kind of situation, it's kind of just like a better Bamboo. But its kit is terrible. I hate that they did this to this weapon. Sprinkler, one of the weakest subs in the game, only good for farming a special, and the special that it farms is one that it can't use well. It does not care about having a Tacticooler. It's a backline weapon. It shouldn't be dying a lot anyway. And Tacticooler basically only gives you movement speed, if not the like quick respawn and special recharge and stuff like that. It doesn't get any value out of that. Very, very unlikely for it to really be a game changer for it as a weapon. It can't protect itself with this special. It can't really protect its teammates with this special that much. You want to run Tacticooler on a team comp that wants to move fast, but it's a hard backline weapon, so it's not going to be moving that fast. So we just need a good kit. And when we get a good kit, the Snipe Rider is going to be awesome. This Snipe Rider is not awesome. Speaking of not awesome, let's talk about the Nova. I remember an old ad campaign that failed because it was a car called the Chevy Nova. And the problem was that they didn't realize that in Spanish, Nova means doesn't move, which is not a great name for a car. And this weapon has very similar vibes to me. This weapon does not do anywhere near enough damage, and even if it did more damage, it would probably want to be more accurate damage before we're picking this up over even something like a Pro. It's Pro range. It's just the same range as the Pro, but way worse for fighting as a main weapon. It also doesn't even paint that much more than the Pro does, because the Pro's paint droplets go out further. So the Pro outclasses it for combat and almost even outclasses it for painting. It has a little bit better of an ink tank, so I still think that this paints a little bit better, but there are a lot of variables determining what better means, and by some measures, the Pro is actually a better painter than the Splattershot Nova is. So that's already not great, because we have not been saying especially nice things about the Splattershot Pro so far on this stream. But it gets weirder, because it doesn't have a bomb either, it just has the point sensor. So what you end up doing with this weapon is you never want to take a fight. So you're always just painting defensively. You're always just like, okay, there could be a fight from over there, so I'm going to paint to make sure that there's no fight there. And while I'm painting over there, I'm going to throw a point sensor over here so that that blocks off a fight from happening from this angle. So now there's no fight on right or on left, so I'm safe from fight. And that actually kind of works a little bit because it scouts. It lets you know information about where the opposing team is. And your teammates can definitely benefit from that if you're doing that the entire game, which is probably what you're doing because you're not going to be trying to take fights. And then if a fight does break out, at least you have the killer whale to maybe help with that a little bit. There's some stuff that it can do. It's not the worst thing ever. But I'm not even going to put it another tier up from here because why would you use this over so many other options? There's so many, even just mid-range shooters. There's a 96. There's a Pro. You could run something like a Mini if you want that kind of range. Like, you could run the Flingza, which has that kind of painting range, paints for a better special, like... If you want a Scout, you've got, like, the Explo. You've got, like, the Nautilus. All of which, like, kill faster and more reliably, and also have point sensor, and also have useful specials. So, like... And it really, they're support specials more than the killer whale is. So, like, why? It's a Scout, but you need more than that on a Splatoon team for it to work. So, not great, not great. Doesn't move. Tentabrella. The Tentabrella, again, is, just like the rest of the Brellas, held back by the fact that it is a Brella, and Brellas are horribly bugged in the game, and the devs are still trying to iron out how to make their shields work. There are just too many times with the latency and with the problems that the Brellas have even without that, that make the shield not function the way that you expect it to and cause you to be splatted in times where you probably shouldn't. The kit is also not phenomenal for it. It would probably... If you give this a good sub-weapon, it's probably a problem. You probably don't want to give it too much of something, but, like, beacons aren't helping it at all in combat, really. They might help you be a little bit stickier and play that kind of skirmisher role where you're flanking and trying to draw enemy aggro. But then you've got Inkvac, and Inkvac is not that great for it. It kind of has this thing where it can stay alive for a long time, but if you're not doing much while you're staying alive, then you're not a threat that has to be removed as much. A previous stamp kit, or previous Brella kit had a stamp that you kind of needed to worry about if it activated that in the back line of your team from behind a tent shield. Like, that was something you kind of had to worry about a little bit more. It wasn't phenomenal for it, but like, it was aggressive and it worked. And that also had mines, if I remember correctly, which are really annoying. So it could kind of be a little bit more of a threat when it went in. But there's just not enough reason to worry about the Tentabrella in this one. People are always... There's only going to be one choke point, first of all. So there's not a lot of flank routes that you can even occupy on a lot of maps. But even if you get into one, all people are going to do is dump up a whole bunch of, like, Ren calls trash damage that is easily put out damage that doesn't cause much threat. It's going to get burst bombed. It's going to get fizzy bombed. It's going to get booyah bombed. And there are just a lot of tools in the meta right now to shred that. Like, that shield isn't going to last that long against a crab tank. There's just a lot of DPS in the game. So it just doesn't do enough with its little, like, shotgun that only one shots from a very tiny range away. The shield isn't going to last long enough for it to get to a meta team comp. So it's just in a sad state right now. It could easily jump 2 or even 3 tiers if it gets fixed and gets a better kit. But I feel for the Brella mains right now because they're kind of being left out to dry at the moment. Dynamo Roller, big, slow roller, which is fine by itself, but the kit is not helping it. Tacticooler, very same problem that the Snipe Rider has. Why does this thing have Tacticooler? It is one of the slowest weapons in the entire game. It's not going to move fast no matter what you put on it. Why are you putting this on it? And Sprinkler as well, which is only good for farming. They have the same kit? Are you kidding me? Sprinkler is only good for farming the special. But this special is not a special it cares that much about. It's only going to be able to help its team with this special. So all you've got is a Dynamo Roller. In Splatoon 2, you could get a Dynamo Roller with a Booyah Bomb, and that was phenomenal. But this is just a Dynamo Roller, so nah. Sploosh is great at a playstyle that doesn't work in competitive play. That is a playstyle of, I'm going to try and zip behind the enemy team and flank them without really being stealthy about it, just using a curling bomb and going and then coming in from behind them. This is probably worse than the Sploosh from Splatoon 2 that had Splashdown, because it has Hammer, and Hammer is not going to move it in as quickly or be as surprising. I guess you could pop the hammer and then, like, swim up to someone and do the jump swings, but at the level that you're starting to do that, you're probably running into people who know how to counter this playstyle. It's not great. You're probably never going to see that without a different kit in competitive play. Okay. Now we get to the really unfortunate lot where I don't even know what you're trying to do with this weapon at this point. It just nothing fits. H3 is a very slow, long-range zoning weapon that gets Tacticooler. Those are two very different play styles. But also, the main weapon is very aim-intensive, which makes it a little bit more of a liability to run on a team than a Dynamo. At least a Dynamo is never going to miss. The H3 is often going to miss, and all it has to help with any extra damage or anything is a point sensor, which is not enough. Obviously, if you gave that thing a burst bomb, that might be a problem, because it might just be too strong, but it's not very functional in its current state. Aerospray. Reef Slider, one of the worst specials in the game. Aerospray, one of the worst main weapons in the game. Aerospray is only good at farming specials, but what it's farming is one of the worst specials in the game. So it has Fizzy Bombs, and it's basically Fizzy Bombs the weapon, and you know what else is Fizzy Bombs the weapon? Machine, one of the best weapons in the entire game that gets Booyah Bomb and also clogs up choke points like nobody's business and can hit up over walls. There's no reason to run this weapon. And I don't think that there will be with this variant. Undercover Umbrella. Up until this point, a lot of people would have called this the weakest weapon in the game. I think it has been unseated from that by Big Swig, but we'll talk about that in a second. Undercover Umbrella, not enough damage for the amount of defensive utility it has. It's just, you're going to get a bomb thrown at you, your shield is going to shred too quickly, and you're going to go down. This does nothing to protect you against a crab tank. It does nothing to really help you against a crab tank unless you can like Reef Slider it. But how do you even get close enough to Reef Slider it before it's like pre-firing you? Because you got relatively short range, you have no way to close the distance, and your sub-weapon is not going to help you with any of that. So yeah, you can kind of hold your ground a little bit sometimes until they get specials, and then your umbrella gets shredded by the wind and it blown out of your hands, and now you're dead. So, not great. Big Swig is the new candidate for worst weapon in the game, in my opinion. This thing is bad. The only thing it can do is paint. The arrow spray at least has fizzy bombs. This one has a wall that it cannot effectively use because its range is bad. And when I say its range is bad, it's like, I'm not even talking about its max range, because for the rollers, range is the same thing as damage. The further the range goes, the further your one-shot happens. First of all, this roller doesn't even have a one-shot except on the vertical flick, which is really slow, and still very short range. Like, it's only like, I think like Dapple Dualies range or something that you can actually one-shot someone with that from, and that's the vertical flick. Like, the vertical on some other rollers is twice that for the one-shot. It's crazy. But also, it gets ink vac, which isn't going to help it push forward any. It's going to get ink vac really fast. If you want to spam ink vac, then that's a weapon that you can use for it. But you could also use the jet and have a valuable long-range weapon that paints a lot and supports. So if you're trying to ink vac spam, you're probably going for one of those, or maybe even the 96 because it has a sprinkler. I don't actually know the times for it. But like, this main weapon is a rubber mallet. It does not do enough damage for the amount of time that it takes to swing it. Doing 70 on a horizontal flick on a roller is completely unnecessary. They didn't need to nerf it that badly. It would still not be that great of a main weapon if it had the same hitboxes like in damage that the Splat Roller has. But it doesn't. And so it's even weaker. And there's not a reason to run this thing. What's worse is the glitch on Eel Tail that I made a video about, which works with this roller and was found out with this roller, and this is the best weapon for using it. So, yeah, it's really, really disappointing. It needs major buffs in order to be functional. It needs a better kit. It needs a lot of things. With a better kit, I could see this being a paint support. Like, you give this, like, a meta special, like a Booyah Bomb, and, like, something it can actually poke with, maybe it can exist in the meta. But this one is not it. And then, obviously, never run Hero Shot, bad weapon. Completely outclassed by V-Shot. No reason to ever use it. That is all. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Have a lovely evening. And if you like supporting me or seeing more of me, here are links. Click on that link so that you can find more links. I've got a YouTube, I've got a Discord server, I've got a Twitter account, I've got a Patreon and a Metafy in case you want to support me. All of those things. But I gotta go. Bye-bye.